I want to pick up on something that Darlene brought up first, and then I think it has been amplified really by all of the different remarks, which is that Lincoln is an outstanding individual, an outstanding example of leadership in American history. But Lincoln's not perfect.
Correct.
And indeed, Lincoln is as instructive in how he reflected the prejudices of his times, as much as he was an exemplar in terms of trying to realize the ideals of his times. And I guess I would ask just a little bit more of a kind of elaboration on that. What are some examples of that in terms of thinking about Lincoln's history, either as an individual or in relation to African Americans? And what can we learn from looking at those imperfections, looking at those contradictions in Lincoln in terms of trying to address discrimination and inequality in our society today?
I don't think of it as contradictions. I mean, I was a leader representing black and white, and I had to pull them together. That means I had to represent both. Lincoln was trying to hold on to the South at all cost, and he really did not want war. He did not want separation, and I think he bent over backwards trying to prevent that. That doesn't mean that, I mean, I had to bend over backwards to get things passed. It doesn't mean, it means that you're a leader. You have to build a consensus, and that means you have to express and represent the fears and the desires of both sides of any issue. I put Barack Obama in the same position right now. We don't know who Barack Obama is or what he believes, and he cannot say. He has got to really hold this world together. I think of him very much as a Lincoln-esque figure, and the only addition is in his office, in his Senate office, he had a big picture of Lincoln behind his desk, and a picture of Martin Luther King and a picture of Gandhi. And I just hope and pray that he can keep this world together without the violence that Lincoln had to submit to.
Well, what about that idea that your obligations of leadership, in a sense, are something that puts you in position where you have to be a product of your time?
I was just going to comment, listening to Ambassador Young. I mean, just imagine what Abraham Lincoln was going through when he's coming by train into Washington, D.C., in a White House that has very little security around it, in a Virginia that's breaks away from and creates a Confederacy, meaning American flags in half the country being ripped down with other flags being put up. Maryland, just a hotbed of anti-Lincoln sentiments surrounding him. And he's sitting there in the White House with all of that going on, and he's become the patron saint, the president, not just Barack Obama most admired, but all presidents admire the most, because no matter how bad they have it, Lincoln had it worse. You know, what Obama's dealing with today with GM, you know, and that he's worrying about what the stock market's doing, or having a summit with Latin American leaders, it was always grimmer for Lincoln. And even presidents I've found, like Nixon, used to go down to the Lincoln Memorial after drinking gin at night and talk to the statue during Watergate, literally. I mean, and that's not an apocryphal story. I mean, people drew from him because of, I think, that sense of how do you perform under the most the greatest adversity. And of course, Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, Team of Rivals, which Barack Obama sort of adopted, that ability to bring people in, like Ambassador Young has spent his whole life doing, and taking people that maybe you don't agree with and working with them. And you see both with Lincoln and Obama an ability to do that.
Well, you know, when you think about Lincoln and you look at him through the lens of race, then you can see all the flaws there. Over the decades before he became president, he said things that were simply racist, if you want to use that term. He referred to African Americans in pejorative kinds of terms. He told jokes that we would not tolerate today. He didn't know many black people, as a matter of fact. And when I look at this man who really has no prior training, nothing in his background really equips him to handle experiential the crises of the Union that he's presented with. But there is a moral core to him that I think we need to emphasize. So while I can point to all of the flaws, there was something that was morally right about Lincoln. Lincoln believed that every individual was entitled to the fruit of his or her labor. And he believed that no one was entitled to benefit from the labor of another. Now, that's a precondition, I think, for honoring and believing in humanity, for believing in justice, and eventually equality of opportunity. So he had to go through a lot of previous learning and experience in order to make that moral center the representation of what he was about as the president who ultimately signed the Emancipation Proclamation and advocated passage of the 13th Amendment.
Right. And I would say that as president, as a politician, Lincoln understood what his limitations were. I think he was a brilliant politician and having a very clear sense of the broad range of public opinion. And had he advocated immediate emancipation, say in 1860, or racial equality under the law, it would have been political suicide. And he knew that. Frederick Douglass, who was a radical revolutionary, understood that. And I think one of the best assessments of Lincoln's career on race and as a politician is from Frederick Douglass in 1876 on the anniversary of Lincoln's assassination, in which there was the commemoration of the Freedmen's Monument. And Frederick Douglass gave the keynote address. It was before the president, the vice president, all members of Congress, the Supreme Court, virtually all of the dignitaries in the nation were there. And Frederick Douglass begins his address by saying, Abraham Lincoln was, he says to the white dignitaries, you are Abraham Lincoln's children, we are Abraham Lincoln's stepchildren. And I can imagine the gasps from these dignitaries. And then he engages in this classic reversal and ends his speech by saying that Abraham Lincoln, judged from the perspective of an abolitionist, was slow, tardy. But that's not who he was. Judged from the perspective of a president who took an oath of office to preserve the Union, he was extraordinary. He was radical. He was forward. And ultimately, his chief aim of winning the war and preserving the Union converged with the aim of ending slavery and seeking to achieve equality of opportunity for Americans. Douglass understood that, I think, brilliantly.